So Kyle, see this bottle of water?
Yeah, tell me about it.
Would it be cool? Tell me about it. Would it be cool if I took a sip of this and I was never thirsty again?
Try it.
Oh, here we go.
Didn't work?
Didn't work.
Didn't work. Ah.
Well, today, that's what Jesus says, but he wasn't talking about regular water.
Ooh.
He was talking about spiritual thirst.
I'm excited. I'm Kyle, and this is Chris, and we are the Bible Guys.
All right, so Kyle, today we are supposed to do a travel destination draft list, which means we're supposed to do rock, paper, scissors, and then whoever wins starts, and we're going to draft places that we've never been, that we want to travel to.
Yes. So here's the thing. It's funny because if you played this against Jeff, Jeff has been to so many places. This would have been, and I'm sure he would have had a list of things.
Well, you know, it's so funny because you can't be everywhere.
Yeah.
So I think the more places he travels, the greater his list becomes.
Yes.
Right?
Because somebody else tells him about another area and you're missing out on this.
And then also the more obscure his list becomes.
Yeah.
Because he's been to the main places, right?
Which means that my list is very minimal, very
right.
Yes. All right, you ready for this?
So, rock, paper, scissors. Ready?
On shoot or what? What are we doing here?
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, shoot.
Okay, ready?
1, 2, 3, shoot. 1, 2, 3, shoot.
I got you. All right.
So we both threw rock, and then he crashed my scissors with his rock.
Yes. All right. I won that one. All right. So first place I think I'd like to visit, mainly because I had some friends who just went there. They told me it was amazing. It's beautiful, very historic. I would love to go to Italy.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yes. Italy with the food. Oh, my gosh. And I heard, too, that their food is like so pure. Because when I think of like pasta here in America, I just think of loading up on pasta.
Yeah.
You obviously love Italian food and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, but I've heard that when it's there, it's like a different sort of.
Yeah.
Quality.
So I was in Italy for 14 hours on a layover. I managed to try to squeeze everything into that 14-hour layover in Rome. But yeah, I did have pasta there, and it was quite different.
Was it good? Yeah.
And awesome.
Yes.
So, all right. So my first one is going to be Dubai.
Okay.
So one of my bucket list items is to go to Dubai.
Interesting.
And what's really funny is Jeff Forrester and Chad had a missions trip to Dubai to TTI last year, and they didn't quite know that was like one of my top bucket lists.
Yeah.
And I said, who's all going? And they're like, not you. And I'm like, oh.
Okay. In a few sentences, why Dubai? What's the reason?
I just am fascinated with the history of just a few years ago, meaning like 2 decades ago, it was just a desert.
Yeah.
And it's one of the most beautiful places on the face of the planet.
Yeah.
Now, there's other reasons also. Tallest building in the world is another reason, right?
Yeah.
So, again, I'm giving you all the insignificant reasons why I would go to Dubai.
Still really cool, though.
They're touristy reasons, right?
Yeah. Okay.
But there's other reasons.
Yeah. Okay, my second would be Israel for sure, and I know you've been a few times, but man, I would love to. Hopefully soon, in the next couple of years, I'd love to go. And I've heard from people that even went recently who just said that, like, when you're reading the scriptures, it's kind of obviously a lot of times it's in black and white. You're reading when you go there and you can see where Jesus walked and John the Baptist, or what we're about to talk about today, the woman at the well. It begins to bring those colors into color, or it brings those stories into color, and you begin to see things how they might have actually happened, which is really cool.
So I've only been to Israel once.
Oh, okay.
And of all the places I visited, the most significant place that stands out in my mind is the scripture we're reading today.
That's awesome.
And then, my second one is going to be, second one is Bora Bora.
Okay.
I want to go to Bora Bora.
Nice.
I long for those commercials that I see with the huts.
Yes.
I want to do one of those one day.
Well, since you just threw out a little party spot, I think I'll throw out one as well. I have friends who have a place in Cancun that they've invited me to visit. I know everybody go. It's like totally a tourist trap. I know that, but I would like to go to Cancun.
Yeah.
Just they have a place, or they have a family member who has a place that's right on the beach, and they're like, we just sit on the beach, white sand, blue water. I'm like, sign me up. I need to go there.
Yeah, and I've been to Cancun.
Okay.
And it is definitely a tourist trap.
Yes.
But it's very nice.
Yeah.
So my third one is going to be Australia.
Oh shoot!
Yeah.
You got me there.
I've always seen it. I want to go, and I think that Sydney would be an incredible place.
Yes.
I do have a friend who lives in Australia.
Okay.
I don't know if he's listening right now, but if you are, hey Jim. But I would definitely stay with him.
I have my in-laws are actually going to Sydney, or they're going to Sydney in the next week or two. They're big travelers. They've been in a lot of places, and that was off their bucket list. So
yeah. And my adopted daughter stayed in Perth for a couple of years, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Wow, that's cool. Okay, so I'm going to go with
She's not really my adopted daughter. I just call her that.
Okay. I'm about to say, I'm like, I didn't know that. Okay. So I think we're on number 4. I'm going to go with my 4th pick. I'll go Germany because that's where, just for family reasons, I'd like to go and see, just where some of my, great grandparents lived and that sort of thing. So I'd like to go to Germany. I don't know if it'd be like
So are you all German?
Yeah.
You're all German?
No. Sorry. But German on like a vast majority of my family is German. On my mom's side, a little bit of Irish. It's like Irish and German, and then German and German. So.
Oh yeah, that's my wife. My wife is Irish and German.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm Italian and German.
Okay.
So our kids are mostly German. And then my other draft list is going to be, believe it or not, Tokyo.
Oh, interesting.
I want to go to Tokyo.
Okay.
I want to see
where they filmed the movie.
No, it's
Tokyo
not about
Drift.
movies. It's all about just the.
By the way, that was a joke where they filmed the movie Tokyo Drift. You know that one,
that's funny.
Fast and Furious.
I immediately cut you off. But no, there's been plenty of movies filmed in Tokyo.
Yeah.
But no, I actually want to go there just because it's just a great city, and it's obviously the city in Japan, right?
Yeah.
So
okay, I would say the next one I would say is I think it's in the Netherlands. I'm going to throw out I think because I'd actually be curious because the Netherlands. I remember seeing a documentary years ago where it said that the happiest people actually live in the Netherlands. Do you know that when they actually did like a survey? It's not like people's what they would consider a happy or content life. It's in the Netherlands. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
But a lot of it, they say it's because it's communal living. A lot of communal living there.
Yeah.
So people live together. And
we got to wrap this up. Okay. So last 2 real quick with that commentation.
Yep.
I've been to Maui, Hawaii. So I want to visit all the other Hawaiian islands.
Okay, you love it.
Yeah.
That sounds great. All right, so today we're going to get into the scripture here. We're going to get reading. Is there any setup you want to do before we get into this, Chris? Or should we just get right into the verses?
I think we should jump right in.
Okay.
So you're going to read Matthew 4:12.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, I guess I should say he's going to read 1 verse from Matthew, 1 verse from Mark, and then 26 verses in John. And the reason why is because, again, Matthew, this is the same incident. So right after the Passover feast and the Feast of the Unleavened Bread, or the Passover day, and the Feast of the Unleavened Bread, Jesus then, leaves Jerusalem and then goes back up north to his hometown in Galilee, in the region of Galilee. And the other 2 Gospels record this as like, hey, when it was over, he sort of went home, right?
Yeah.
And then John says, but there was a significant thing that happened on the way home, which is the woman at the well.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. Matthew 4:12 says this. When Jesus heard that John had been arrested, he left Judea and returned to Galilee.
That's it.
Yep. Simple. I love it. Matthew's description of it was very straight to the point. Mark, also straight to the point, says later on, after John was arrested, Jesus went into Galilee where he preached God's good news.
Yep. And again, it just coincides with the events.
Exactly. So John picks it up and says this. Jesus knew the Pharisees had heard that he was baptizing and making more disciples than Jesus, though Jesus himself didn't baptize them. His disciples did. So he left Judea and returned to Galilee. Then says he had to go through Samaria on the way. Eventually, he came to the Samaritan village of Sychar, near the field that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired from the long walk, sat wearily beside the well about noontime. Soon a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Please give me a drink." He was alone at the time because the disciples had gone into the village to buy some food. The woman was surprised, for Jews refused to have anything to do with Samaritans. She said to Jesus, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink?" Jesus replied, "If you only knew the gift that God has given for you, and you are speaking to you, you would ask me, and I would give you living water. But sir, you don't have a rope or a bucket," she said, "and this well is very deep. Where would you get this living water? And besides, do you think you're greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us this well? How can you offer better water than he and his sons and his animals enjoyed?" Jesus replied, "Anyone who drinks this water will soon become thirsty again, but those who drink the water I give you will never be thirsty again. It becomes a fresh, bubbling spring with them, giving them eternal life." "Please, sir," the woman said, "give me this water, then I'll never be thirsty again. And I won't have to come here to get water." "Go and get your husband," Jesus told her. "I don't have a husband," the woman replied. Jesus said, "You're right. You don't have a husband. You've had 5 husbands, and you aren't even married to the man you're living with now. You certainly spoke the truth." "Sir," the woman said, "you must be a prophet. So tell me, why is it that you Jews insist that Jerusalem is the only place of worship, while we Samaritans claim it is here at Mount, Gerizim, where our ancestors worshipped? Jesus replied, believe me, dear woman, the time is coming when it will no longer matter whether you worship the Father on this mountain or in Jerusalem. You Samaritans know very little about the one you worship, while we Jews know all about him, for salvation comes through the Jews. But the time is coming, indeed it's here now, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. The Father is looking for those who will worship him that way. For God is spirit, so those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth. The woman said, I know the Messiah is coming, the one who is called Christ. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. Then Jesus told her, I am the Messiah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's an incredible passage, and there's a lot to be found in there. And so let's just start with some overall thoughts, which is, by the way, the biggest thought that stands out to me is this, is that this is the first time that Jesus reveals plainly that he's the Messiah to any person. Now, if you've been listening the last few days, we already talked about how John 3:16, the most popular verse in all the Bible, wasn't given from the mountaintops to the masses. It was given to Nicodemus one-on-one.
Yeah.
And once again, Jesus is not shouting this, the truth. I mean, it is the truth of his ministry, which is, I'm the Messiah. I'm the long-awaited thousands upon thousands, hundreds of prophecies fulfilled. I'm the one to come to save the human race.
Yeah.
I am God in the flesh. I'm the Son of God. Like you would expect that truth to be delivered from the mountaintops in a setting that required his authority or his proof. But once again, what does he do? He finds a woman, not just any woman, but a woman who's outcast.
Yeah.
A woman who feels rejected, a woman who feels unloved, distanced from God, and he delivers the truth. The very first time he reveals he's the Messiah is to this woman.
I love it.
I think that's probably the thing that sticks out to me the most about this story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. And I know, we've talked about this before in different messages and even on the podcast, the fact that she was there at noon, right? The heat of the day, the hottest point of the day. Clearly she's, got a lot of shame and guilt. She doesn't want to be seen. And then even for him to go there, for a man to be there at that time, that hour being there was just like it could be seen as like a very scandalous thing. And I love the fact that.
But Jesus didn't care about that.
And that's what's so cool about it, is Jesus kind of broke down those barriers because her heart, who she was, and that news mattered way more to him than people's opinions of him or the gossip and the rumors and all of that.
Yeah, so we'll get to his conversation in just a minute, but let's cover the circumstances that we've already unpacked, which is, number one, women went to the well twice a day in the cool of the morning and the cool of the evening. So she's there at noon, and it says very specifically she's at noon, right? The 6th hour.
That was important for them to note.
Your version might say, right? Number two, everybody else walked around Samaria. Now, by the way, that goes back to their history. Their history actually is, it was in my notes. I saw it earlier, but it speaks into, after the northern kingdom with its capital of Samaria fell to the Assyrians, many Jews were deported out of Assyria, and foreigners were brought back and to settle in the land to help keep the peace. Now, this was back when remember they were divided in the northern and the southern kingdom back in the Old Testament in 2 Kings 17. And it says the intermarriage between those foreigners and the remaining Jews resulted in a mixed race, impure in the opinion of the Jews who lived in the southern kingdom. Thus, the pure Jews hated this mixed race, called them Samaritans, because they felt that their fellow Jews had intermarried and betrayed the people of their nation. The Samaritans, and this is the part where it's important, the Samaritans had set up an alternate center for worship for themselves at Mount Gerizim. And that's listed in verse 20, to parallel the temple in Jerusalem. But it had been destroyed 150 years earlier before this conversation took place. While there was a long-standing prejudice between Jews and Samaritans, Jesus did not live by such restrictions. So the conversation that they're having is they're having like conversations about the Messiah, which is why she said, hey, you Jews worship in Jerusalem. We have to create our own place. And everybody knows for hundreds of years, we worship here on this mountain. And then Jesus leads into the conversation that says, hey, there's a time coming where it's not going to be restricted because God's not going to be just at the temple and God's not going to be at your mountain, but God's going to be everywhere. That's what he was saying. Yeah. And he was saying it's going to be in spirit and truth. It's going to be an action of the heart. Yeah. That's what he's referring to. And there's a time coming. And then she's like, what are you talking about? Mm-hmm. So we haven't fully covered the fact that every pure Jew who was offended, and by the way, it's also important to note this. The reason why they were also offended and the Samaritans were offended by the Jews is because when it came time to rebuild the temple, the Jews did not let Samaritans partake. Mm. And so that's one of the reasons why they built their own temple. Yeah. Because they were so offended, they're like, fine.
We'll do our own thing.
We will do our own thing.
Yeah.
You don't want us touching the temple and rebuilding the temple. And so that was also a separation. So Jews would actually go from southern Jerusalem, and instead of going straight up through Samaria and straight up to Galilee, oftentimes what they would do is they would go up and they would actually cross the Jordan River and go on the other side of the Jordan River this way, and then cross the Jordan River again and go around the entire middle section of Samaria, which would add 2 full days to their journey if on foot, because they didn't want to talk to or associate or deal with Samaritans. That's how unclean they were. And yet Jesus is a rabbi.
Yeah.
And he's a man, and women had, women were regarded as having no voice in the court of law.
That's right.
They were seen as less than, which is why she says, "Are you kidding me? I'm a woman, and you're a Jew, and you're a rabbi, and you're a man."
She's like pointing out all the things that now we are seeing. Like,
why are you talking to me?
Like this shouldn't be happening.
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And so their conversation, is I love how Jesus starts with, give me water. And she's like, why are you here? Why are you talking to me? And then he says, if you knew who you were talking to, right, I would give you living water. And then she, of course, doesn't understand. She thinks he's still talking about water. And then she says, well, I'd like to have this because I'd like to not come back to this well again, which is why we introduced it this way, right? Yeah. And Jesus is like, no. And then I love her objections. And this is where I know I'm talking a lot.
Okay. No, go ahead.
But I've been to Israel, and this is why this is the most significant part for me. So did you know that Jacob's well is still there and that you could still drink from it?
No.
And there's a lot of places in Israel where they sort of guess where Jesus is. And it's sort of funny. Like they build churches and holy sites, and they're like, this is where Jesus said to the disciples on the shore of Galilee, come and follow me. And I'm thinking, he could have said it anywhere on the shore of Galilee, right? How do you know this is where he said it, right? But it's sort of close.
Yeah.
Well, this is an unmistakable, absolute piece of real estate where this conversation took place. Yeah. Number one, it says it was in the city of Sychar. There's only one well in Sychar currently, right now. Number two, the mountain ranges go like this. And so you're not going to walk on the side of a hill that's impossible. You're going to walk in the valley between the mountains, which means like there's only one well that's right there. And so that Jesus had to have literally walked on this path, hit the city of Sychar, which is still there. And they built a church around the well. And how like a Pepsi 2-liter is like or a Coke 2-liter. Sorry, I chose Pepsi for all the fans out there. How it's like wide, and then it sort of comes into like a small spout.
Yeah.
Well, the opening for the well is only maybe this big, right? But when you look down in it with a light, you see that it looks like 30 or 40 men.
Like it opens up.
Have dug side by side, and it goes deeper than any other well in all of Israel. And by the way, it's ice cold, because it's actually the frozen snow caps from current modern-day Lebanon, which has Mount Hermon, which stands 9,302 feet or something like that above sea level. And there's actually snow in modern-day Lebanon, and it actually melts and runs through the ground. And actually, they dug this well so deep that when we were sitting at this well, he said, watch this, and he dropped a pebble, and we counted to like 12.
Wow.
Before it hit, right? And then he lowered the rope, and then everybody drank from the well.
Wow.
Well, in Israel, 120 degrees with no shade is the difference between life and death.
Yeah.
And so finding a well, but not just any well, but we're talking ice cold water in Israel where there's no refrigeration.
Yeah.
So can you imagine when Jesus says, I have living water. And she's like, are you kidding me? This is Jacob's well we're talking about here, right?
Yes.
Are you greater than our father Jacob, who dug this well? How can you possibly supply better water than what is rapidly known as the best water in all of Israel?
Yeah.
Like nothing is greater than this, right?
Well, I love it too. I love that, you're pointing out that, the water, the temperature is a difference between life and death. So she's going there for the water, almost it's like when she got there, and anybody who got there at that time of day, it was like saving them. It was giving them new life. Now they drank that water, I'm sure it felt so refreshing. And then Jesus meets her at that spot just to say like, no, I have something better for you. I have something that will give you eternal refreshment, not just momentary. And I just think that's so cool. But one of the notes that points out from verses 20 through 24, I want to point out is that it says the woman brought up a popular theological issue, the correct place to worship. But her question was a smokescreen to keep Jesus away from her deepest need, which is true. I mean, she was kind of trying to like, leave me alone. Let's not talk about my husbands. Then Jesus directed the conversation to a much more important one. The location of worship is not nearly as important as the attitude of the worshipers. And I do think that's really important. I mean, you kind of hit on that earlier, but I think that's how we can kind of translate us to now. It's like the location, where we go and worship and how we worship and what music, all that kind of stuff. It's like, I think that God is looking for the right heart. And by worship, I mean, like, we think of worship a lot of times as like music, but just when you're worshiping God, like, do you have the right attitude when you're driving your car and you're, worshiping, not singing, but just in a state of worship, when you're around your family, when you're on vacation, all those things, do you have the right attitude in worship? Or is it strictly based on a location? So many people think of, I have to be in the right spot in order to worship God, and that's just not true.
Or like God exists only at church.
Yes, only at church, and only these places.
I have to go to church to pray.
Yes.
I got to go to church in order to, ask my sins to be forgiven.
Yes, yep.
Right?
And it's between a window of time on this day, Sunday, between 10:30 and 11:30. That's my time to worship. And I think what Jesus is trying to tell her is explain that there will come a time where, like, you will worship in spirit and truth. And therefore, we're living in that time where we have access to the Holy Spirit. We have access to God, and we can worship wherever we're at, which is so cool that we get to live in the benefit of that 2,000 years later.
I have to put a plug in for The Chosen.
Yeah.
And you have to watch the episode of The Woman at the Well. It's by far the best depiction that I've ever seen of Jesus interacting with the woman at the well. It's very emotional, and it's unbelievably well done. And it makes sense, because a lot of times when you read this conversation, you're like, they're talking about mountains and things, and you're like, what are they talking about? Well, we've sort of unpacked that. Well, the conversation on The Chosen, it's just worded so well.
Yeah, and it's the tone. You see the
tone,
you see the emotion, you see all that stuff. It's great. Yeah,
you're right about that. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
The tone in which it was probably delivered. And then, of course, once he starts pointing out her issues in her life, and he says, go and call your husband. That was so brilliant of him, right? I mean, obviously he's Jesus, but he's like, go and call your husband. And she's like, I have no husband. He's like, yeah, you're right.
I know, dude.
You've had 5 husbands, and the guy you're living with is currently not your husband. And so, naturally, she then receives, the fact that he says, I'm the Messiah. And, in The Chosen, I remember she says, you've chosen the wrong person. I can't even believe I'm getting emotional even saying this. And he says, I came to the well just to meet you. And by the way, the scripture tells us he must go through Samaria. That's what it says. So everybody else was going back to Galilee, and they went around, but it says, but Jesus said, I must go through Samaria, which means he did have an appointment with her.
Yeah,
and he knew.
For sure, The Chosen took some liberties with that statement.
Oh, for sure.
But at the same time, I do think it was an accurate statement, and the way it was worded and so simply, it was definitely beautiful.
Yeah.
So.
Well, listen, there's probably a lot more to say, but we're hitting that time. And so it's just a great encouragement. So go back and read it and sit in that all day. Jesus delivers the best truths one-on-one to those who feel the most disconnected and most unworthy. It's a great truth for today. So we'll see you next time on The Bible Guys.